See, I listen to more music than just progressive rock and metal. I can listen to popular music too, outside of just Taylor Swift and Ava Max and all those female-dominated. Anyway, let's talk about Coldplay. Music of the Spheres by Coldplay. So, Coldplay, I don't think I need to give an introduction on them. I think what I will do is at least give you my take on Coldplay up to this point. And I've had a little bit of a spotty relationship with Coldplay, if I'm being perfectly honest. I got into them a little bit late. I actually got into them more in the X and Y. I love the title track and Twisted Logic, but it wasn't until the big, critical darling that is Viva La Vida came out that I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm a fan of theirs. I just feel like every album that came out afterwards had this kind of leapfrog effect, where they had the stereotypical idea of what Coldplay should be, and then an experimental album to just kind of try their feet in different areas. And so that's where we get tracks like the Milo Xyloto, which was the stereotypical Coldplay sound, and I will admit, it disappointed me a little bit. Like, there are still moments on there that I enjoy. Going right into Ghost Stories, which I have fallen in love with. I think it's one of their strongest albums. I didn't like it when it first came out, but I definitely fell for it later on. And then we come into Head Full of Dreams, which I do not like. I think it's their worst album. It follows way too closely to Milo Xyloto, and it just didn't really do anything for me. I just felt very flat. The next album of Everyday Life was fine. Again, it was more of an experimentation, but again, I was left wanting more at the end of the day. I just felt very cold. I felt like they kind of missed the mark a little bit in terms of their concept. Now coming into Music of the Spheres, I feel like this one is a little bit of a blending of the two ideas, but still much more on the going back to the original idea of this Coldplay essence that we've had with Milo Xyloto and A Head Full of Dreams, or A Head Full of Stars? A Head Full of Dreams. I'm not even going to bother to double check my work on that one. I wasn't too excited about this, even though on face value there's a lot to really, really like, and I ended up did enjoying. I like the concept of this album and being kind of a duality of sense, in that everybody is an alien to some group or people, while also essentially belonging to one human race. And that is definitely very Coldplay. It's very much in this, it's a certain point of view from a very privileged status of, can't we all just get along? And even though the sentiment is a good one, and I'll never criticize or look down on as somebody trying to bring forth a good movement, it's still, I don't know, I think it's very self-serving. I think it's very a privileged status to have one that's just like, can't we all just get along? We're all really one people at the end of the day. I'm like, that is oversimplifying so many different struggles that certain individuals are facing, that you're completely missing the point entirely. Like, it's very early 2000s cat motivational posters, and the music that follows through is kind of blended within that. I've almost want to term it like yoga mom rock. You know how you have like dad rock, and you have like butt rock, and you have this wine mom rock. This one feels like yoga mom rock, where they're putting down these ideas, especially on this album, on certain tracks that I'm going to talk about in a bit, that's very hallmarky in their lyrics and the music, and just like, we're all one people, let's all just be nice to one another. We're all one people, let's get it done together. And I'm just like, oh man, that's on the one hand very innocent and very like, yes, but on the other hand, you are, like I mentioned before, oversimplifying a lot of different things. Another aspect of this album that I really enjoyed in terms of concept was this a little bit more of like a space theme, like a space opera kind of an approach with the Music of the Spheres, in terms of like overlapping, as well as like, yes, you might be an island unto yourself, but you also are a part of all these different groups, and like the Venn diagrams and where everybody kind of meets in the middle. A part of this is using emojis to title some of their tracks, and I think that's really good. You know, these symbols carry a meaning that almost everybody universally can understand. You know, you've got the planet, you've got the the twinkle sparkle. You've got the heart emoji, you have the planet Earth emoji, you have the infinity sign. These symbols carry meaning that transcend the printed word, right? And so almost anybody can look at them and understand what it is that then exemplifies the concept of this album of we're all living as one human experience. And I thought that was kind of smart. I thought that was really nice. The music that's being led, I also kind of enjoyed if they had kind of followed it to the logical conclusion, because I feel like they're banging into this wall of what Coldplay should be, because I'm loving these more like 80s synthwave feels that we have on here on a lot of these tracks, where the synths and these bigger sounds are blending together to kind of reanimate the 80s synth arena rock, you know, like something from Asia that I've been listening to quite a bit this summer. It feels very natural on this album. The planet Saturn emoji opens it up pretty well, and again, it sets the stage for the more of that synth wave aspects. But it's the two tracks that follow, Higher Power and Humankind, that kind of lost the mark. You know, like these two tracks could sit perfectly on Milo Xyloto or on A Head Full of Dreams or Head Full of Stars, and not really be out of place. They have that same drive, that same rhythm, that same flair, without, again, losing a single beat. In fact, there's a lot of lyrics on Humankind, the third track, that is very that yoga mom aspect, that whole, you know, let's just be kind to one another. That's why they call it Humankind. And I'm like, that's a nice sentiment, even if it is a little bit misguided. Some of these interlude tracks, the one of Sparkle, I love. In being this haunted, like dreamy, ethereal feel to it. It's very synth-led, it's very somber. It's a perfect little interlude track. And I wish that this was countered with more of a driven track, but unfortunately we go into the first track with a feature, which is Selena Gomez, with Let Somebody Go. And as much as I feel Selena does a great job of lending her voice to this and serving the song perfectly, I just wish she was given a little bit more to do, because I feel like this track is a little bit of a dud. You know, like it revolves around a tried and true Coldplay aspect of, if you love somebody, just let them go. Even if it hurts, it's going to be the hardest hurt that you'll have, but in the end, it's healthy for you. And I mean, it's fine, but I also feel like it's a little bit of a dud. And this somber, slower movement is followed up with the emoji of heart or human heart. But this song has a little bit more dynamics to actually wake things up. It's all a cappella, and we actually have two features on here. The first one being Jacob Collier, and I think he lends his vocal works perfectly. I know he's able to really orchestrate a grand sound with very little. Once We Are Kings comes on and provides more of a feminine touch to this, their voices just soar, and I'm loving the deep soundscapes that they're being able to capture with just this overlay of vocal works. And I do like the concept of this. You know, they're talking about gender norms and are they good if they don't service us anymore? You know, as boys, we're taught to not show our feelings, don't cry, push everything down, do not emote, be that strong man. And with the women, you know, it's a little bit softer. You can wear your emotions on your sleeve. You're able to emote. You can get in touch with those. And, you know, it deals with that gender norm. And I can applaud them for tackling that kind of issue, especially nowadays where gender norms are starting to become questioned. And it resonated with me personally. So I really enjoyed this. But I think the main benefit of this is how Coldplay was able to orchestrate the baton pass between Human Heart and People of the Pride, which, if I'm being honest, is my favorite track off of this album. It's a big, large track. It's the centerpiece of this album. This is what they were trying to do a little bit with Everyday Life and having certain tracks be big and grandiose, but I just felt like some of those tracks just fell flat for me. This one really catapults it into this harder rock aspect, and they're channeling directly Muse's Resistance album with a track like Uprising. But I love how this track starts off with these blaring horns to kind of start the march going. great way to open up this, and I just wish this track was a little bit longer, you know? Like, I wish that this track was like 4 minutes as Let Somebody Go was, because that track stretched on way too long. If they had switched run times, I think I would have enjoyed the first half of the album a little bit more than I ended up doing. So from there, we go into the second half of the album, starting with Beautiful, which is just god-awful. Chris is doing this weird thing that he did on the last album of Everyday Life, where it's this synthesized falsetto that's been like run through a computer to sound almost like a chipmunk. Like, it feels like if the Chipmunks went auto-tune. And I don't like it. I don't like the sound. I also don't like the chorus work of this love me, love me, love me, love me, love me. I'm like, buddy, no. It's like, I'm the best version of myself when I'm being loved. I'm like, that is not a good look. I don't know. I think the best version of yourself just needs to be yourself. Anyway, don't like this track. I think it's the absolute worst. And then we have a little bit of like this sorbet track of Planet Earth, which is really interesting. Planet Earth, again, it's like the emoji of Earth. I would have expected something a little bit more, but it just kind of feels like this soccer pitch or this football pitch chant. Then we come into the final feature, the final collab of My Universe with BTS, and I am glad to see that there's some good collaboration in this sense. Like, it does feel like BTS, the J-pop supergroup, came with Coldplay at the table and constructed this together. You know, it doesn't feel like Let Somebody Go, where Coldplay wrote this track and Selena Gomez just kind of came onto it. I don't know if she has a writing credit or anything, but it doesn't really feel like it. This does feel like there are moments that are very BTS and very J-pop in terms of style, in terms of flow. And I like that it's not just a melting pot as well. Like, it doesn't just kind of bleh, you know? It reminded me a little bit more of the Chainsmokers collaboration with something like this. I think that this one works a little bit better. Like, I wasn't a big fan of something like this. I think that this one works a little bit better because you can see both where Coldplay is and where Coldplay ends, and where BTS is and where BTS begins. And I like that there's a little bit of a passing of baton between the two in terms of singing styles, in terms of rhythm and flow, and it works pretty well, you know? Like, I didn't expect to see that Coldplay would collab with a J-pop supergroup, and it worked pretty well. It's not my favorite track from the album, but at least it worked pretty well. Then we come into the final two tracks, and I know a lot of people are wondering, me being the big prog guy that I am, with Infinity Symbol being the final interlude with the big track, the big 10-minute plus track of Coloratura. I think I got that one. Ugh. These two tracks, I actually prefer Infinity a little bit more. I love, again, it's very similar to the twinkle, sparkle emoji, where it's this overlay of synths. It feels very spacey, feels very dreamy, and I love the essence of that. You know, I love that synth-led, ethereal aspect of it. So by the time we get into Coloratura, I think that's maybe how you pronounce it, we've already started the march. We've already started this journey. And I do like the ebb and flow of this track. I like where this track goes. It does feel a little bit like Baby's first prog suite. And it is nice. It's kind of cute in that sense. I do think that if Coldplay wants to, and I encourage them as a progger, such as myself, to try their legs at these bigger suites of music, because there is a little bit of a shine to this, you know, the journey, the ebb and flow, the soundscapey aspects to this. It's one of the most original tracks that Coldplay has put out, probably since Ghost Stories, in starting off very somber, very slow, working itself into a gentle crescendo and a gentle plateau. There's nothing too exciting about this track. Like, there's no big crescendo that I was kind of hoping for, but upon re-listen and thinking about how this track lended itself to the ending of this album, I think it serviced the album pretty well, even if I was kind of hoping, again, for just a little bit more of a big crescendo, instead of just a wandering of the landscape, seeing what's there, and then kind of just fizzling out at the end. Yeah, it's a nice meditative track, I think, and that was a good way to end the album overall. So, where am I sitting with this album? This album is probably the best album they've put out since Ghost Stories. I still like Ghost Stories a little bit more. This is probably on par with like Milo Xyloto, in that there are some moments on this album that I really, really enjoy. The overall runtime is nice. It's one of the shorter ones that Coldplay has put out. I don't want to skip any tracks on here, maybe outside of Beautiful. It still provides a nice sit-down listen with a few spotty tracks on there. In the end, I would say that Music of the Spheres by Coldplay is one that I would stream. You know, I'd come back to it. I would listen to this again, especially when I'm in the proper headspace for it, but it's not one that I would look forward to listening to again. And it's probably not going to find its way into my collection of records as well. So that's kind of where I'm at for Music of the Spheres. What do you guys think about this album? Have you heard it? If you have, did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And where do you think this ranks within their whole discography, right? Is it on their better side? Is it on their worse side? I would put this more on their better side, but as I mentioned, and if you like what you see and you want to help support me, consider donating to my Patreon. I've left a link down below. $1 a month does go a long way. You get your name at the end credits, and depending on your rate, you can get a live stream or a album review. I've actually just released a Patreon album earlier this week, so there you go. But I think that's all I've got. That's all I've got. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.